All right. Hello, everyone. So this is a quick video that I wanted to make, going over the animations that I did for My Little Pony: A Maritime Bay Adventure. Now, I can't go into like the behind-the-scenes functionality of the animations with like the animation system and stuff, just due to NDA. But there's nothing really stopping me from just opening up the game and just showing you by controlling the game. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do that. So, there is a lot that I did for the animations in regards to the gameplay. Almost every animation you see while you move the character around is done by me in some way, whether it be the animation itself, like how the body parts move around, as well as like how the animations blend between one another and how the animations respond to your movements and such. Nearly all of that is what I've done. And today I want to show you specifically like certain things about the animations that set it apart from other like games in this like kids game genre. Now we've been sitting still in place, and you've been noticing probably that the character has some like fidget idles, as I like to call them, where the character just sort of breaks out of their standard idle loop and like does a unique motion of some kind to sort of break the tediousness or the repetitiveness of the default idle. In this game, I've given most of the characters two default idles, I believe. For Sunny, it's definitely two. And one of the things with the idles is that I wanted these idles to work while you are moving around as well. You'll see, like, the next time the idle comes up, I'll show that. So you can see the idle started playing, and now I'm going to start slowly walking, and you can see the idle still starts to play. And that required a lot of animation blending with different, like, animation layers and stuff within the animator controller in Unity, because I'm not playing a different idle animation for walking. There's a lot of different animations being stacked on top of each other here just to walk and idle at the same time. Of course, I don't have these idles playing while running because that wouldn't really fit in as well, so I have it automatically disable when you are starting to run at a full speed. But if you're just walking around with the analog stick halfway, you can still get idle animations playing. And as you can see there as well, when I stopped walking, there's another animation blend from walking to idle. And there's two versions of it depending on which leg is leading on the front. Don't know if I can get them to show too clearly. Yeah, you saw both of them there. It's pretty subtle, but it is there to help the transition. There's a lot of miscellaneous transitional animations I did to sort of help smooth things out. Regardless of what animations you happen to trigger with how you play the game, there should at least, well, not all the time, obviously, because there's a lot of different niche scenarios, but like most of the standard actions you do in this game should have some sort of transitional animation, whether it be jumping and landing while you're running, or jumping and landing while you're standing still, while you're transitioning from rollerblades to walking again to rollerblades, while you're turning. There's a lot of transitions as well with just turning. You can see how the character leans, and also how their animation itself just changes based on where their feet are. Like, I had to adjust the feet location or the hoof locations depending on the rotation angle, and you can see you can see that in its extreme when you're standing perfectly still and turning in place. You can see it's a completely different animation versus just walking in a very slow line. It's less drastic the faster you're going, of course, since your turning radius is a lot less extreme. But yeah, to get into walking more specifically, there are a couple stages of walking we have. This is what I call the slow walk. This is the very slow walk, and you can speed it up a little bit more by going up to here, and speed up a little more to this. And then it just starts to transition into a run, which is just a completely different animation set, pretty much. And those are just while walking in a straight line. They all have different variants when walking left or right, of course. Again, it's just to make sure they all blend nicely, regardless of which direction you move in any given situation. With jumping is kind of weird with ponies, obviously, because, well, I mean, with any character in the game, honestly, given in real life, if you try to jump with speed, you can't really course correct. But in games, you sort of expect that to be the case when you control a character. That's just intuitive with player movement, with any game. So one of the challenges I had is, how do I like make that feel right in the animations? Because obviously we want the character to actually move in the direction, but how do I make the character animations feel like the action flows right? How it makes sure it doesn't feel like unnatural, like the character's just randomly starting to just drift a different direction without there feeling like there's an effort behind it by the character. So one of the first things is, of course, the head tilt, and I actually haven't talked about much about like the head direction, like where their head looks. I guess while standing still on the ground, you can see if I just like do a standing turn, the head turns towards where the character, or where you, the player, last input. So if I inputs the up direction, you'll see the character turn their head towards the forward direction before their entire body rotates in that direction. And that's sort of just to help lead the character to where they are intending to go before the character has time to actually change their actual direction. Because in this game, you can't change your direction instantly. There is some time to it to sort of help smooth things together. And it's especially not very fast when you're like doing a standing turnaround like this. And that's on purpose, because like if you're going slow on purpose, I might as well make the turning slower, because it's not like you're trying to go fast anyway, right? You're literally doing like a 10% analog stick input just to walk. So, but it does help show the head turn effect, where the character turns towards a direction before they actually turn that direction. Now, back to jumping. You can see that effect also applying to your jumps. It impacts nearly every part of your movement in this game with the animations. So that's one of the important things, in my opinion, of making sure the character feels responsive and feels like they are putting effort into a direction the player is inputting. Now, that's not the only thing, though, of course. So while jumping, you also might have noticed that the character sort of twists their body a little bit. Their like spine isn't perfectly straight. Their spine is bending the direction they are changing their direction towards. And that's, again, just to add to that effect of the character putting effort into changing their direction. Even though it's a physically impossible thing to do in real life, it's a game, right? And we still need to sell that thing being possible, and that's how I'm doing that as well. But there's also one more layer I added to this. So while jumping, there is a standing jump animation and a standing landing animation, right? You can see the pose while I'm falling to the ground is the left front hoof is like pointing straight down, right? But if I jump and start moving forward, you can see the front left hoof starts to lead forward a lot more because you're starting to move, so you're trying to make sure you catch yourself while staying in motion, right? But that also plays into effect when you're turning directions. Like if I do a standing turn around and then start to turn, you can see that the character suddenly starts putting their front hoof forward more to sort of feel like they're pushing themselves forward more. It wasn't a fully intentional thing to do, but it was sort of like a happy accident that sort of helps sell the effect more of putting effort into changing directions in midair. Now there's another entire animation set that I haven't really talked too much about yet, which is the rollerblade animation set. This animation set is mostly different, in terms of the animations themselves, obviously, but in terms of functionality, there's some similarities, but some differences as well with the animation system. One of the main differences is how the rollerblade acceleration works with the animation system. So when the character walks, the type of animation they play for walking depends on their speed strictly. There's no other attributes that affects the animation's like walking speed. However, when doing rollerblade animations, it's a bit different because you're on wheels. So the actual like rollerblade animation that plays depends on your acceleration state, not necessarily your speed. To be more like exact, it's actually a combination of both, but it's mostly your acceleration. So if we start from a standstill, you'll see that the character puts on a lot of effort to accelerate. You can see that the character, Sunny, like lunges a lot more. They sort of crouch and rapidly strokes the rollerblades more and more up until they get to speed, and then they sort of relax their stroking more, even though they're at their max speed. So stroke fast, and then once they relax more, that's when they're at speed. And it changes when they're on slopes too. So this part of the level has a slight slope to it. So if I go down the slope in a straight line, you'll see that the character actually stops to stroke. They'll just roll down until they reach flat ground again, because obviously you're on wheels, right? When you're on wheels, you don't have to stroke when you're going down. You can just let the wheels and gravity take over, right? But there's also one more thing in the opposite direction. So let's go back down. Change direction. And if we go uphill, even though we're at max speed there, we are still stroking really fast because, again, we're fighting against gravity, so I have to put in more effort to keep at speed up the hill. Now, it's also worth noting that these are all cosmetic. The actual, like, player controller system with the physics of the character don't change regardless of, like, the slope of the terrain. like your max speed and your acceleration is identical regardless of the slope. It's just the animation that's making it feel a little different. Now this efforts into stroking the rollerblades is carried over to like turning as well. So if I were to turn slowly like this, in like a sort of a semicircle, you'll see that the stroking stops as we rotate, because we don't really want to stroke in a direction while we're trying to turn in place, because that'll increase our turning angle, or radius, or turning radius, I should say. Meaning that the character will swing a lot more widely when turning in place, which will feel worse to control, obviously, but also, animation-wise, I feel like it just feels more natural to just stop stroking and let the rollerblades just simply roll when doing a very subtle semicircle turn like this. And it is also worth noting that when we do this sort of semicircle thing, the gameplay physics does slow the character down, and that's on purpose. It's because, like, if you're trying to roll in place, there is rolling friction, and of course we are applying more friction by turning as well. Like, we're not just going in a straight line, we're turning, so that's gonna apply a force to slow you down even more. That's just like a natural, like, intuitive physics thing. We could have not done that, but I wanted to do it. That was my decision to do it like that, because that just feels more natural, not only for gameplay purposes, but for animation purposes. So you'll see if I turn in place constantly, we start to slow to a crawl, and that'll also come with a payoff, I suppose, it's one way to say it. But once we start moving in a straight line again, we'll start accelerating more, putting more efforts, and then we start to relax more with our more relaxed strokes. It helps make the animation system feel more dynamic when you're playing with rollerblades, instead of just, like... I could have honestly just gotten away with the animation system just using the primary relaxed strokes the entire time you're using rollerblades. But I didn't want to do that. I felt like rollerblades needed more than that, given how dynamic and how fast it is. So I really wanted to put in the extra effort to make sure it worked well like that. Now, the animation set at a very slow pace becomes very interesting, because if you wanted to turn the character in place with rollerblades, you can't really, like, roll in the rollerblades to turn. So in the animation system, I had to figure out a way to sort of do a standing turnaround while preserving the rollerblade state. It's hard to explain, but basically, as a result, all I did for that was make sure that Sunny is doing her, like, normal standing turnaround animation, even with her rollerblades off. It's sort of the same animation. And that's, like, the only logical way to turn in place without, like, rolling the rollerblades, if you get what I mean. And that all had to be implemented in this rollerblade animation system, which wasn't entirely intuitive to make sure it all blends correctly. And there are some faults with it too. There are some, like, odd transitional states. I tried to iron it out as much as possible, but it is still pretty good, I would say. Just some animation transitions aren't perfect. If I had more time to work on it, I probably would have made it better, but, you know, time limitations and such, we had a lot to do with this game in the short development cycle we had. So, yeah. I think that's about it in regards to the animation system. Like, rollerblade jumps are basically the same. The landing animation, like you'll see when you land, there's like a little bit of a flinch when you land. That's the same thing as when walking around. There's still that same flinch animation. There's not much different there. For rollerblades. Oh yeah, I guess the hair physics is the thing. That is something I did contribute to as well, with how the hair interacts with the body, right? Like if we try to turn the head where the ponytail, the braided ponytail starts to, like, intersect with the spine, it doesn't actually go through, it actually goes over it. That was a system I had to implement. I didn't actually make the system, it's using like a Unity asset store thing, but I did have to sort of tune its settings and stuff for the tail and the braided hair for Sunny. But other than that, I think that's about it in terms of the animation system itself. I could say a lot more with the animations, like the individual animation assets itself, but it's hard to do that when I don't have access to the, like, animation files anymore or whatever. I will like to do that at some point. I just need to, like, maybe find a way to get permission to do that. But for now, we just have to stick to, like, normal stock game in-game footage. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed and found this at least somewhat enlightening, right? I will see you later.